Hi, I'm Bridget Hard, a professor of the practice at Duke University. And I'm a member of STP because it is filled with an incredible community of people who really share my passion for teaching. For me, STP is home. It's a sense of family and friends, people who inspire me, people who give me lots of great ideas for all the different challenges that I face as a teacher. And this community is waiting for you. You can join STP at teachpsych.org.
Hello, Psych Sessions listeners. I'm here to tell you about an exciting upcoming teaching workshop with Beth Morling and Jessica Hartnett. As you know from the show, Jess Hartnett is our very own stats guru, offering us the Not Awful Data podcast series here on Psych Sessions, along with the queen of research methods, Beth Morling. And they will be answering all your questions on a live Ask Us Anything workshop on Friday. They'll be sharing strategies and tips for teaching with AI, how to get your students to actually read the book, and ways you can engage students in a course they didn't necessarily want to take. Now, I'm already registered, and if you're interested in joining me, just email psychology@wwnorton.com to register yourself. We want to thank Norton for their long-term support of Psych Sessions.
I don't know that we're stopping and thinking through what is career success, what do we actually want in our lives, our complete lives, people, not just on paper on the CV. And is that how you're defining your worth? I don't think the CV should be defining your worth.
You've just heard Kim Case, professor of psychology at Virginia Commonwealth University. Eric had the chance to sit down with Kim for this 219th episode of Psych Sessions, conversations about teaching and stuff. Would it benefit you and your students to know about the latest in clinical and educational assessments? Well, we're proud to partner with Multi Health Systems, MHS, who has been a trusted name in psychological assessment for over 40 years, delivering science-backed solutions for clinical psych, education, and more. And recently, MHS launched the Connors CPT Online Suite, an advanced tool set designed to assist in diagnosing ADHD and other attention-related conditions. The suite includes 3 powerful assessments: the Connors Kata, the Connors CPT-3, and the Connors K-CPT-2. These tools help psychologists evaluate inattentiveness, impulsivity, and sustained attention through both visuals and auditory tests. You can stay on top of what's going on in psychological measurement. Pause this episode and head to mhs.com/email division to sign up for their clinical and educational newsletter. You can also follow MHS on LinkedIn for the latest updates.
Welcome to another episode of Psych Sessions. I'm so pleased to be here today talking to Dr. Kim Case from Virginia Commonwealth University. Hi, Kim.
Hi, how you doing, Eric?
Good. I'm good. Thanks. How are you?
Great, and I appreciate the invite, as I was saying. Let's see, I'm cold today. It feels like 20 degrees outside. Did a little holiday shopping this morning already, so I'm in a good spot.
Okay, so first off, we are recording this December 2024. I know we're not supposed to timestamp those things, but that's a rule I'm okay breaking. And so were you holiday shopping in person at a store or on Amazon?
Yes, I went to an actual store.
Wow, those still exist.
It was really weird. Yeah. Last night I was on my phone on Amazon. Ridiculous. And then I was like, I need to go see actual things in person. So I went old school. Yeah, a little bit.
You know, I agree with you. Sometimes you got to see things in person. But I'm telling you, the luxury of Amazon, bringing it to my front door is just, I'm a lazy SOB. And so I love Amazon. It's like Christmas all year long.
So efficient.
It's so efficient. And I know it's not, I know there's issues with workers and there's legal issues and employment issues. I get that. People say that about Walmart too, as well. But, the efficient, I even do, okay, this is really not related too much to psychology. I even do my pharmacy through Amazon.
Oh,
I do
yeah.
Amazon Pharmacy, and I have all my various medications and prescriptions delivered right to my front door. It's pretty
Okay,
awesome.
I love that for your time efficiency. I know faculty are always looking for time efficiency. I have found a local independent pharmacy here that is also like a gift shop. It has a post office counter at the back, and I physically go in and talk to these people, and I love it.
Yeah, that's a really great point about that notion of a one-stop shop where you can do multiple tasks in the same location. And if the people are friendly, that's just an added bonus over time. They can become your friends or at least good acquaintances. So
Yeah, and they get to know your history, and like you learn about like their kid, and like just I don't know. It's hard to find human connection these days, Eric.
yeah, as we're talking on Zoom, recording a podcast, but we can see each other at least. Now we won't release the video, but you're reminding me of Blockbuster Video. If you had an old Blockbuster in your neighborhood, and if you got to know the people that worked there, they could kind of, you walked in and they knew what kind of movies your kids liked, or they knew. I mean, it's that personal connection. It's that added level of service, and that is something that in some ways Amazon cannot provide in the same way as human-to-human contact.
So this is all leading up to our obviously very pre-planned segue to how this maps onto teaching.
To what to teaching?
Teaching. How this all maps onto teaching. Like, what are we missing when I call it the in-between gets taken away, right?
Okay, well, Kim, talk about that a little bit. What do you mean by the in-between gets taken away? And by the way, just as an aside, I do have some scribbled notes, but there's no set format for us today. And we'll get to everything.
Knows what's going to happen. This audience is going to be for a wild ride for sure. I don't know. While we were talking about it, I'm like, yes, convenience. Yes, I can do that in my pajamas. Yes, I can order and show up at my door, or I can do an asynchronous online class or even a synchronous online class. And there's so many benefits, undeniable. And then I have yet to be able to get to know the students in the same way, despite all my efforts, right? And the intentions and the strategizing and the listening to all the podcasts about how to make that connection work in an online space, right? Like it's the in-between is the socializing, seeing people's complete nonverbals, having the sense that, this student might need a little extra check-in today. They look like they might be down. There's just all these cues that flow, right. And students seeing other students interact, and then they get encouraged to engage more, right? Like, yeah, there's just a lot. And the in-between of like, I heard a student say 1 year ago, they were in a different class, and they were in that different class in person, and they happened to hear other students in a different row saying about the exam coming up the next week, and they had forgotten there was an exam the next week, but just overhearing it, they didn't miss that.
Right. No, I think you're right. There is something unique about that face-to-face, in-person interaction, not only professor to student, but as you rightly pointed out, from student to student. The only counter, or it's not really a counter, the only observational offer, which is not overly insightful, is that when we offer things asynchronously or synchronously, like remote or online or whatever, I think we're reaching students that may not have the opportunity to have the face-to-face interaction.
Yep.
So it to me, it's almost like I'd rather teach in person, but yeah. I'd really rather reach students than not reach students.
Yeah, I know. And the pros on each side are undeniable. I think it might be time for us to admit that they aren't the same.
Right.
But the pros and cons are there for both modalities. And I guess there's more than two, right? If you're being technical about it, it's a continuum. But yeah, I think we need to get past the idea that it's all the same.
I would completely agree with you. And I have said for a long time, and I'll say this publicly now, I think being a great teacher online is much more difficult than being a great teacher face-to-face. And it could be, I'm not saying that it can't be done. I'm just saying maybe I'm not good at it. Being a great teacher online, and it's a different skill set. And I know of a handful of faculty who have found a way to make it great for them. And their students love it and they adore it and they rave about it and they prefer it. But my skill set isn't there yet.
Well, we're always growing. If we stay in our growth mindset, in our educator identities, there's always more to figure out, right? And if nothing else, technology will always force us to have something else to figure out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Kim, you didn't warn me ahead of time that you're an optimist. I really would have appreciated that warning.
No, if I've ever been accused of that.
Okay, so are you teaching online these days or face-to-face?
I am. So, I'm doing a little bit of all of it, right? As many of us are. I've actually, the last 2 years, I've taught either hybrid or asynchronous online. Well, and also if you throw in this summer, a completely in-person 5-week course in Italy, if I might just do a little humble brag on that.
Sure.
That was fun. My students were amazing. So I had if you could, the closest thing you can have to a religious experience as a teacher, it was the most engaged, in it, excited group of students, to a T, 100% of them were give us more, give us more, give us more.
You mean the ones that you took to Italy?
Yes. And, you kind of worry when you plan a study abroad, perhaps, that you don't know what mix of intentions you're going to get there. We might want all the students to come with that passion and energy, but some students might choose study abroad for more tourism reasons than learning reasons. I get it. So mine had a very healthy, mature balance of we're going to get the most out of our time here in this cultural immersion experience, and we're going to travel. We are totally in it also for the learning in these classes. And so it was just such a huge gift for me, honestly. So that was amazing. So I guess I've had a mix of fully in-person, hybrid, and asynchronous online most recently.
So tell me more about the Italy experience. So did you teach a class? Did they earn credits? And where did you go in Italy?
Yeah, I would really advise people check this out. So in Sorrento, Italy, between Naples, Pompeii, and then Capri, you have to go through Sorrento to get over to the Isle of Capri. There is a place called the Sant'Anna Institute, which is this entire existence of this place, which is overlooking the fishing marina. My classroom literally overlooked the fishing marina bay. Their entire existence is study abroad for American students. So they have Italian professors that have a base of courses, but then American based professors can come do a 5-week course. And that's a 3-hour credit, 5-week course, kind of typical, right? We might do in a summer. And then they add that offering. So the students that you bring from your university, but also other students that have come there from all around can also sign up for your class. And it's really great. I was in an apartment, living with Italians around me, and at the local little grocer that the Italians shop at. And it was really, for me, a cultural immersion that was different than where you sort of take students for a 10-day trip and you're constantly hopping hotels, right? So it was really, really neat that way. The way it works for our students is they take 6 credits. So they took my class, which was Psychology of Women, which we did with a very international, intersectional, and a heavy influence on Italy and culture.
Sure.
And they also took one other class, and those were all from Italian professors. So they took cross-cultural psychology from Italian professor, or so one did an internship where she worked in hospitality, locally. It was really great, diverse experiences they all had. And then they worked in some trips.
Well, sure. Yeah. Because aren't your students, they're paying a premium, right? They're paying the VCU for 6 credits, but then it's probably got to be at least a couple $1,000s or more to go for 5 weeks.
Yeah. The whole trip with the credits was $6,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
That
it's not the highest thing I've ever seen.
Right. It's pricey, but obviously it was successful because you had, how many students went with you?
So 21 went from VCU, and then I had, I think, 3 or was it 4 more that sort of signed up that had come from various other universities around.
And so were you the only U.S. professor that went?
I was for that term, at least. I was the only U.S. professor that was teaching a 5-week course. And then they have 2 sessions, 2 different summer sessions. And then they might have 8-week courses too that span if a student's going to stay the whole time. but I'm not sure about all the details of that. But
Gotcha.
it was really great. It took a lot of ramping up and recruitment and energy. VCU has a very well built out global education office, so they had a lot of opportunities to sign up to get scholarships. So that helped them a lot. We're a minority serving institution based on our Asian American Pacific Islander population, but we're also really high percentage Pell eligible and first gen students. So I think the access to all that support was really what did it for them to be able to make the trip. But yeah, I mean, we got to know, this is part of it, right? We got to know each other so well. If we had been here for 5 weeks in person, it would have been the same. We got to know each other so well because we were together 3 hours, 3 days a week. And I mean, when there were events, like they had a Pride event one of the evenings for the students. And so I kind of went to that. And, and that's something you do on campus too a lot, right? Like there's an event, you go and you kind of have that more in between time. And what came out of that is, and I hadn't really, after being in administration for 4 years here, I hadn't really restarted a lab, like a research lab with students yet. So after being with these students in Italy, I was like, yeah, I'm ready to do this. And so I recruited, I guess, 4 of them for this fall, started doing research with me. And then a couple more of them are going to join in the spring. So all these beautiful things are sort of coming out of it on the other side too,
When you were abroad, did you share many meals with them? Like occasional dinner or something like that?
At least twice that I can think of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least for faculty.
A lot on the weekends.
No, I'm sorry.
They were traveling a lot on the weekends.
Okay, very good. I do think for human beings, there's something special about breaking bread together. There's something about, when you and I go to conferences, one of the biggest things to arrange is who you're going to go out to dinner with and where you're going to go. That time outside of a classroom, sharing a meal, getting to know one another, not necessarily always talking about academics.
Right.
I think, and I don't share a lot of meals with students, but I do with faculty members when I travel or occasionally on campus or, go to a local restaurant, things like that. And so that opportunity for meals to me is really, really valuable. And obviously you connected with students if you kind of surreptitiously recruited research assistants.
Yeah, it's really been great. It's turning into probably one of them applying to be in a doctoral program that and work with me, and we'll see how that works out. So it just keeps sort of developing into more beautiful new ideas that are sort of flowing out of it. And speaking of meals, I just scheduled on Wednesday next week my lab, and then the one that's going to join the lab next semester also, we're going to do a little white elephant at a Mexican restaurant and I was like, do not buy anything. You just pick up something in your house you're not using, right? Like, so we're going to do that, I used to do that a lot at my previous faculty role. And I like to bring people together. What you were talking about made me think of what I've really been into the most the last few years, which is, because you mentioned faculty at conferences, right? And like the things that can come out of those moments are really surprising often. And one of my biggest, I don't know, and I'll call it a frustration, sure, is that I don't think the majority of the faculty in higher ed realize how those beautiful surprises can come out of like just showing up to a faculty development program, a workshop, a speaker thing, your colleague is presenting what they did on their sabbatical, whatever it is, showing up to those spaces isn't a waste of time. I think it's often misunderstood as a waste of time or return on investment. Like, well, I'm not going to get this thing done that I need to get done. Why would I stop and go to an event? You end up having research collaborations, new teaching ideas, right? Like this person knows, oh, you're interested in that thing because I just heard you say that. I know this person over here that's doing a thing like that. And then there's this new connection. And I guess I'm a little bit worried how we're moving much more away from those opportunities in the first place. And I think the mindset is even getting more stark in the value of that being even worse, going down, being missed. So go ahead. Yeah.
No. I think you're exactly right. I'm trying to remember. I think it was Dave Myers in a very early episode of this podcast talked about he was asked to substitute for someone to go to a conference like on or near his campus. And this was really early in his career at Hope College. And he sat next to someone who then became a research collaborator, who then helped launch his career. And so, Kim, what the way I think we think about things similarly, which could be good or bad. I don't know about that. Let's not go there yet.
Much trouble.
Yeah. There's no substitution for time.
Yeah.
And I tell my students this all the time, which is, show up for Psych-Chi events, go listen to a speaker, even if you don't think you might be interested. It could be who you sit next to. It could be you go up and talk to some other faculty member attending some event. There's no shortcut for time. And I will tell you, the students that struggle with this the most are transfer students. Because they've just been somewhere else for 2 or 3 years. They're coming to Boise State to finish it off. They don't know anybody. They're juniors or seniors, technically, by credits. And oftentimes, they're in a hurry to get done because they've been doing this for a while. Now they went to a new place, but yet it takes time to develop relationships and to build your network. And so that investment of time is a good thing for many reasons, as you talked about.
Does this relate to the definition of success or our very narrow, and this includes faculty, but our very narrow range of what we think success looks like? Because I'm wondering, I don't want to oversimplify this because I know there's so many pressures on students. I mean, I was a working student. I get it. I didn't try to volunteer to go to a bunch of stuff. I had to be at TJ Maxx working the counter. So, but I understand the idea of like, okay, maybe in my community college, I went to some things, maybe I didn't, but like, I just want to get these courses done. So the success is check off the courses I need to graduate. That's success. Success, maybe not including, I need to build a network. I need to, networks will help me succeed in my next steps, right? Like success being, how do I show I did more than just check off the boxes of courses because every student's doing the same thing. I need to stand out somehow, So I'm wondering if that's a narrow success model. And then with the faculty side, the narrow success model, I might ask us to critically reflect on as a national or an international body of faculty is success just finishing tasks? Or is it thinking about the bigger picture of what we're here to do and not devaluing the time that always feels like you're having to take away from the immediate task that's pressuring you, but could have a career-long impact that you just described that David encountered, right? Almost by accident, but he had to say yes to doing something for someone, which also took his time, right? But you never know if that beautiful thing is going to happen in that space. And maybe success is also putting time limits on things that we don't tend to put time limits on very, very often. And they overly consume our weeks, our months. And then guess what? 30 years into your career, speaking of the late career thing that we went to, right? 30 years into your career, you're like, so I published some things and I taught this number of students and I mentored maybe this number of students in my research lab, and that's great. But I felt so isolated, and I had to spend a lot more time away from my family because I never built those collaborations, and those collaborations can, make the work smarter, not harder. I don't know. Now I'm just rambling, but I don't know that we're stopping and thinking through what is career success. What do we actually want in our lives, our complete lives, people, not just on paper on the CV. And is that how you're defining your worth? I don't think the CV should be defining your worth.
We'll be right back.
Whether you're a passionate psychology enthusiast or a dedicated college professor, we know that every student is unique, and so should be their learning journey. That's why we're thrilled to introduce you to Macmillan Learning's Achieve platform. Imagine a space where learning is as dynamic as the students themselves. Achieve offers a personalized experience with interactive ebooks and collaborative class management tools designed to meet each student's needs. But that's not all. Immerse yourself in our multimedia study tools and explore over 100 new videos, each crafted to spark curiosity and deepen understanding. For those who believe in empowering students with essential skills, Achieve has exclusive skill activities to help them master note-taking and APA-style usage. It's more than just learning. It's about preparing students for success in the real world. Innovation in education is at the heart of what we do. So why not be a part of this journey? Discover how you can inspire and transform learning experiences by visiting macmillanlearning.com/psych sessions. Together with Macmillan Learning, let's inspire what's possible for every learner. Until next time, keep exploring and keep learning.
So what is your worth? Where are you going to find it? And then how do you take this thing we call being a faculty member and then backwards design that? Okay. Can we just use some terms we're used to if we're still using that? But, here's what I want my life to be. How am I going to create this job, craft this job? There's this thing called job crafting that I hope faculty will latch onto in a way that really questions what is success and questions what are the academic myths I'm being taught and what's the academic socialization that I was socialized into that might not be serving me so well now. And I need to question those things and be willing to say, there's another way to think about that. There's another way to reframe that. And I'll just stop rambling if you want to say anything.
No, that's fine. I think higher ed likes structure. Higher ed likes tradition. And so I think we lock ourselves into, in the first 5 years of your tenure track career, you've got to have 5 peer review publications, and they've got to have
where you are
an impact fact, or whatever the strictures are, the structures are, and we lock ourselves into thinking that impact is made through journal articles and book chapters and things like that, and I think there's a pocket of people nowadays, and there's an emerging literature about non-traditional impact. And so things that you do and I do, like we have a podcast.
Yep.
And so, Garth and I started this in 2017, and I won't go too deep into this, but, we're coming up on 300,000 downloads. And there won't be 300,000 people in the span of my career that, if you added all my publications, all the presentations I've ever made in my entire 33-year career at Boise State, that there haven't been 300,000 people exposed to my work in that way. Yet a podcast can have a broad reach. And so,
this is Eric Landrum. The 300,000 might exist outside the podcast, to be honest with you. But I take your point.
Kim, that is such a sweet compliment, and I really appreciate it, and I am not editing that out. And so
I will be listening. Do not.
That is very kind of you.
So this is public scholarship, right? This is public
giving it away
of our scholarship. Yeah, that's right. And we could also come back to the expectation that academics can never charge for anything, which we also need to start critically analyzing. But
here we go. Yeah,
I'll put a pin in it for now if you want. But so P&T, right? Annual review, public scholarship is an add-on. Public scholarship, and we can define, what are the things in that, right? But, one of those examples being like podcasting, which more of us are doing, but also the syllabus challenge I created in 2014. It's on my website. Anyone can use it. They can download it. All of us are always putting out resources, sharing syllabi. I'm not saying those things need to be charged for, but I'm just saying that's also public scholarship that isn't recognized. It might be recognized as a nod in a promotion, but it's not gonna count the way a publication in a peer review journal is, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know how we come to grips with some of those things. I think university cultures individually are going to be easier to change and progress in those ways in terms of policies being written in ways that can recognize those types of contributions. And some institutions will never allow for those things to be recognized and rewarded in promotion, for example. But can people who do public scholarship think it's valuable start to think about how we can get on when there is a P&T task force to review the guidelines, bring these topics up, see if we can point to, there's some really great, ironically enough, peer-reviewed articles about how public scholarship should be counted.
Right.
Asia Eaton, one of my buddies at Florida International University, has written one of those wonderful articles. APA has their whole, what was the way they were phrasing it? I think it was citizen psychologist, which I didn't love because citizens got some touchiness to it for me, for a lot of people who are undocumented, for example. But it's the same idea, right? Like, how are you putting out this information into the universe versus what I never wanted to be, which is someone who wrote articles that sat on a dusty library shelf because I'm so old that when I started publishing, that's where it went, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you hit on something in there that I want to circle back to, the pin, so to speak, which is I'm frustrated by this general notion that people must give away their expertise. And I think that emerges in a number of different ways. One is volunteering to be an officer for an organization. I'm personally thinking about Society for Teaching of Psychology, or PsyChi, or Rocky Mountain Psychological Association, where people are expected to volunteer and give their time and expertise. And that's the tradition. That's the way it's always been. And I will admit that some of those institutions are slowly changing. There are some stipends now, for example, for the president of STP and PsyChi, where we recognize that your service might require a course buyout at your institution. But Garth and I, for psych sessions, we've never paid ourselves, because that's kind of the selling point. When we go asking for money from agencies that support us and sponsors, that's a big selling point to them. Oh, I'm going to give you money, but you're not going to put it in your own pocket. You're going to use it to help pay for other things, or maybe hire a part-time employee, or buy new microphones or whatever. And so it's
just basic functionality.
Yeah, it's a really, Kim, I think you hit on it. It's a really weird thing and okay, here's the other one, OER. All right. And so honestly, it's a really noble idea that we can empower students to go to school and not let the finances of college textbooks prohibit them from going to school. But at the same time, we're oftentimes asking faculty members to give away their intellectual property for free, so they can't help feed their families or advance their status through money, which is kind of important these days. And so that, maybe somebody pays for OER in the background, but it's not really made public. And, we give away these open educational resources. And I guess I've always rubbed up against that model, because why would we ask someone, and who's going to be able to do that? Probably the most privileged among us, which means newer faculty, younger faculty, who may not be in the position to work 3 years on a book to give away for free, may not be able to financially do that.
Yeah, that's true. And it's, I have seen some of those models with OER where universities or even other organizations within disciplines will say, oh, here's a stipend that can maybe buy part of your summer so you can work on it. But the equivalent of the 3 years does not add up, right? Even if you get a stipend to do it. And the ones I've seen are like $5,000. And I haven't seen more than that.
Yeah.
And that's something. It's better than zero. And it's probably more than someone's going to get on most books that they publish. Again, your model probably is much more profitable because I think more people buy your books, but but I don't know necessarily that everyone's going to have that. There's like a certain point where like the first year, the book royalties are like in the maybe 2,000s, 3,000, and then it goes down. So I don't know, maybe that model is the way to think about it. But I think, it's about the mindset piece. And the other areas, I'm glad you brought up the elected officials, because it's a time intensive. I mean, APA, I think, pays the president $50,000.
I didn't know that.
$50K, I don't think $50,000 is a lot more, $50K. But they have the resources for that, like most of our institutions or professional associations do not. What I've seen as a model, and so for example, Division 9 is psychological study of social issues, SPISI. That's where I've been the most sort of involved in leadership. But I don't think there's a stipend for president at this point. And what tends to happen is if people are at institutions with resources, they can negotiate a course release. But the reality is a lot of people at a lot of types of institutions that are not R1s with a lot of embedded resources and sort of the value of understanding why having a faculty member in that role is good for the institution. It's very rare that that's going to be possible, right? Or if you're in a small enough department where you can't take a course release, because then it all falls in on itself. and the students can't get the courses they need. So in the sense that your courses are not extra and they're core to success for like graduation rates and like being able to go through the sequence. So the other area I would say is like, giving a webinar or being a keynote speaker or having someone contact you and say, we have this very specific need. We think you can fill it, but it's something you've never designed before. And we want it perfectly. And I think this is good, perfectly customized to our needs and our current context and our current situation. And you can do that for $500, right? And I'm like, you're talking about me doing 60 hours of work for a high quality experience. And when a speaker says to me, I charge $3,000, I'm like, that's probably low for what you're into it.
But I think, and I don't have data on this, the vast majority of our colleagues think asking $3,000 or $5,000 for a speaker fee is just obnoxious. But there are pockets we both know people who have found the pockets of places where they can go and do that because sometimes organizations or universities have money for things like that.
Well, I will tell you that the highest that I know of, and I'm sure this is not the highest, is his sort of $10,000 for like a 90-minute talk.
Yeah,
and that's virtual.
I'm not going to say the person's name, but we invited a famous psychologist here to be a speaker 15 years ago. It was the campus book read. The campus read his book, and then, freshman sections of different classes analyzed it. And then we invited the author here, and his speaker fee was $15,000.
Okay, there you go.
And the university found that money and invited him here, and he gave a talk about his book, and students flocked to it, and I think it was well worth it. And it didn't cost. I think it was probably $15,000 plus expenses.
Plus the travel. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's just a mindset, I think, that we're having a hard time breaking our colleagues.
So this brings us around to who, it's not equivalent. There's an inequity here. Who gets the $15K stipend? And people are like, that's absolutely correct. This person should be asking for that. We will scrap for it and we'll find it. The money's always somewhere if they want to do it.
Yes, ma'am. It is.
Okay. And then who is doing the kind of work that we think should be given away? So DEI, for example, OER you also mentioned. So that is connected to DEI, right? So I'm doing all these little letters, but diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice work. It's an interesting space where people feel like if you charge for that work, there's something immoral about it, right? So these other sort of perspectives get labeled onto it, or judgments, and sometimes they're behind the scenes and you aren't told about them, and sometimes they're subtly communicated, and sometimes they're explicitly and directly and hostily communicated in email. So I think it's a particular space where a lot of people from marginalized identities are doing the work. And so that already means, these are people we can say, you don't deserve to be paid for these things. But the work itself is also devalued in a way that says, if you're not giving it away, then you're trying to benefit from something that's horrible, right? There's a paradox there that can't be solved in some way. But two things can be true. DEI can be values-based, and the DEI expert has to pay their rent and buy food. Like those two things can be true, and you're not immoral because you charge for sharing what may be decades of expertise that you build up, also based on your lived experience going through those, constant microaggressions, discrimination, whatever you might be facing, right?
Right.
So I think we need to be careful. I understand critique of capitalism, and I understand critique of sort of for-profit as the only reason to sort of like swoop into a DEI space, because we did see a lot, and there are patterns that happens, right? So in summer 2020, George Floyd, we've got Black Lives Matter, we've got attacks on Asian Americans, we've got so many things happening at once, and sort of this, yet again, a whiteness reawakening, supposedly, that there's racism in the world. And so at that point, people started wanting to have these speakers, right? And there was a, I think, an uptick in invitations, maybe some more funding at the moment because people weren't traveling to conferences. And then that sort of shifted back now to this should be given away for free. Oh, what I was going to say is we saw people who had not been doing DEI work say, oh, look, money's getting sent to this. So now I'm a DEI expert. Right. So we do need to be watching out for opportunistic claims of expertise in an area where, so I get that. We need to be careful about that. But people who are engaged in DEI and have been in various iterations and topics that they might specialize in, shouldn't necessarily be devalued compared to the person who is the common book author for the year, I guess is what I'm saying.
I think you've correctly identified the confound, which is we need to value people for their expertise, full stop. But then sometimes we conflict that or confound that with our perceptions. It's hypocritical for me to say, you need to value me for my expertise, but I need your DEI expertise for free. And so, and the other piece is, and this happens, I think, with experts a lot, let's say there's a DEI issue in my department or on my campus. I could spend 100 hours reading the literature and listening to podcasts and reading blog entries and going to websites. I could spend 100 hours to get up to speed. Or we could invite and pay a DEI speaker to come in, and she or he who's been studying this for 25 years could give us really good solutions in an hour. Well, that hour is extremely valuable compared to my 100 hours going down a rabbit hole on a topic I know very little about.
And it's actually cheaper if you were to calculate out
absolutely
time and person salary hours. Right?
I see videos all the time about plumbers who talk about this. They can walk in and they can fix the valve that's leaking in 10 minutes and they charge $300. Well, why can they get away with that? Because they fixed those valves and troubleshot that situation for 30 years. And so they can do it. We don't pay by the hour. We should be valuing expertise rather than sunk time.
This also relates to teaching expertise, right?
Yeah.
And I go back and forth on it. I mean, I know we have a very teaching commons model, which I love, which is that we share. There's always the question of, how many years did that person spend developing the thing that they just gave away to everyone, right? To your point, like the plumber. And then when in our minds does something become chargeable in a way that's ethical? And that's all subjective and socially constructed.
Yes.
And I don't know where it is. I don't know where the line where it flips over. So it's just fascinating to me.
Yeah. So Kim, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. And I want to ask you probably my favorite question that I ask, I think almost all of my guests that I interview. Growing up in your home, was the question, will you go to college? Or was the question, which college will you go to?
It was when you go to college, and then it became which. Yes. Now, this is fascinating because I'm not from a middle class or college educated family. My mother made a conscious choice and there's no parenting books that suggested this. And there's no, access within her family or friend group that told her to do this. She just made this up, that she never said if, and brainwashed me from the start, right? Which I love. And we were just talking about this today because my mother and I both went into a store together and did shopping like in person, which is wild. My great-grandmother finished to 3rd grade. My grandmother finished 8th grade. My mom was first-generation high school graduate, and so was my father. And, no one in my grandmother's family, siblings, none of them finished high school. So there's so many different layers when someone says first gen, right? Like, first gen, no one made it past high school until me. And that was just that had just happened barely. So, and then I have a cousin who's 5 years older than me that we didn't know she was going to even finish high school. So, and my mom was like, I made a decision to say when, and that you weren't getting any options. And so, so what's the rest of it? I think this is always so fascinating. And there were books in my home because I was just a little nerd. And so she made sure I had access to those kinds of things. And I made really good use of the school library. And It was back when my mom like scraped and scrapped and saved so she could buy an encyclopedia set.
Sure.
Right. And
Yep.
It was like a little half bookshelf that had all the little Britannicas on it. And I just like thought that was the best thing ever. And it's so ridiculous to think about now. But like people came around selling those things and it was expensive. That's like a payment plan situation.
That's right. Or you bought them a book at a time. You didn't buy the whole set.
I'll take A.
Yeah, I'd like Aardvark through Bear, please.
That's right.
The A to B volume. Yeah. So let's go back, and I think this was your term. Let's go back to nerdy Kim.
Yeah.
And let's think about high school.
Do we want to do that? Okay.
Okay. Well, first off, if you don't want to do that, then
I'm just kidding. I'm an open book. It's cool.
But so, were you an athlete? Were you a band geek? Were you in drama or debate or chess club or yearbook? What was your thing?
You started off pretty strong. I did play tennis. My first year, I was a rifle twirler in the band.
Okay, and color guard, or did you not like calling it color guard?
We had the flags, and the rifles made it very clear we were not the flags. We were not the color guard. We were the rifles. We were out front, and we were like getting concussed by hitting ourselves in the head with wooden rifles all the time, right? Super dangerous. I can't believe they let people do that. Yeah, but it was a trip. It was really fun. I was also a clogger, still am a clogger. So I'm an Appalachian clogger. I've been on competitive dance teams, exhibition dance teams. I started in middle school in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I also take this with my mom's adult team sometimes when they would let me because I knew all their dances too. And what else did I do in high school? I ended up being like, I don't know, what was the club, like the nerdy club? I was president of like the beta club, I guess. And I was in like the Latin club because of course I took Latin with the Latin teacher. Went to Europe with the Latin teacher on like a study abroad kind of thing when I was 16, which I want to go back to this. Like my mom, who was a single mom who got no child support, and there's not like a lot of exposable income. We sold candy bars. We sold Krispy Kreme donuts out of the trunk of her car.
And I remember that too.
Did all of that stuff to get me this Italy trip where I got, it was Europe, but included Italy. So that was the Latin teacher component. What else was I up to? Obsessively studying and developing my long-term need for therapy, academic perfectionism problem. And so that's where that came in. And the reason, well, not the only reason, but one of the major factors that contributed to that is of no interest to anyone listening to this podcast is that they sort of made this A+ system in like the 3 years, 4 years, but maybe a 5-year gap that I was included in, that the valedictorian, if you had to get enough A+ to beat out the other people who were getting A's. And so if I didn't get a 99 or 100% in a class, I would lose GPA. So this bred a long-term issue that I'm now doing, I think, a lot better coping with and trying to, just let that all go. But so it was an intense amount of work that meant I didn't do a lot of social life stuff. I think, but yeah, I did manage to do the tennis thing and the rifle thing, and that was fun. Yeah.
So where did you go for undergrad?
Well, I started out, oddly enough, because they recruited me with scholarship money, a very small Southern Baptist, East Tennessee, 2,200 student small liberal arts called Carson Newman University College, probably college at the time. And I was a Bonner Scholar, so I was doing like a certain amount of weeks of service work for that. And I was an honor student. I loved that. And then after a year, I just had to get out. I did start to notice, let's just put it this way. When I was in kindergarten, on my report card, the front described the student to the parent. He will learn, to work with others. He will develop the skills for a happy life, whatever the cheesiness they wrote. Every single one of them, I wrote an S in front of the he. Okay, so this is like the feminist was there. So at the Southern Baptist College, I noticed that there were differences in how, like the men's rules and the women's rules for the students. And I didn't like like it. So I transferred to University of Tennessee, Knoxville as a good orange blood volunteer raised to be obsessed with the UT football team should. And so that's where I finished.
Is the phrase Rocky Top?
Yep, that's us.
Okay.
That is us. Right. And I will say too, and this may be interest to the podcast listeners, I had classes with Peyton Manning. And so I was there in the height of our football team being the most amazing it's ever been and ever will be. And they changed it to Peyton Manning Way, like the little street right by the stadium. And then I was also there at the same time that Pat Head Summit was the Lady Vols basketball coach.
Oh, okay, sure.
Famous, amazing women's basketball coach of all time. And so it was a special moment for UT, to be honest.
Did you? What your first declared major at in Tennessee, was that psychology?
Oh, of course, yes. So I took a high school 1 semester psychology class, and I've been in it ever since.
Okay, very
totally
good.
Totally done. I was like, this is it. This is amazing. I started at UTK in 95, fall of 95.
Okay.
And probably my junior year, maybe took social psychology with a grad student. And that was the moment. Oh, okay, this is me. This is it. So there've been very clear moments where it was like, okay, that's it for the rest of my life. That's it. And I never had any, explore other things. Not sure this is for me. Once they hit, they hit.
Did you do all your graduate work at UTK?
Oh, no. So then I did my doctoral. From undergrad, I went through, did the master's and doctoral, like one program, they accept you all together kind of thing at University of Cincinnati.
Okay, very good.
Kind of odd because I went to work with a developmental clinical psychologist named Howard Fishbein, not the Fishbein and agent that people are thinking of. But he had just written a book on prejudice in children. So it was developmental. And so it was kind of odd, right? They didn't really have a social program as an experimental psychology. So you were either experimental psychology, which meant you were doing human factors, which I wasn't doing, or you were clinical. That was sort of the model at the time. So very much true to how I have been my whole career. I just made up my own thing. So I was like, oh, well, fine. I'm going to go take qualitative methods for a year with the Ed Foundations people. I'm going to take race and education and sociology people. I'm going to go learn from the demographer in sociology how to do literal coding and confirmatory factor analysis. I'm going to go to women's studies and get a grad certificate and take 12 hours for them. So they were always just looking at me like, what are you doing? So I made an interdisciplinary experience when I didn't even know that's what I was doing.
Sure.
And I just saw gaps, I'm like, I had a very, I would say pretty traditional psychology doctoral experience. I don't know, hopefully things have progressed some, but like, I was like, there's things I need to know that I'm not getting here, And so I just tried to go find them.
And that's pretty savvy that you would know that. So Kim, I want to be respectful of time. We're coming up on an hour here, but I wanted to ask you this. Was there anything in your mind that, thinking about our recording today, that you said, oh, I want to make sure I talk about X? I'm asking you now to solve for X.
Solve for X. Oh, I love that little nerdy little pun. Okay.
You like that? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Can we put it in the academic dad jokes book? Okay. So
John Westfall is the guy that does the academic jokes. And so if you follow him on X,
that's funny.
He's the guy that does that for sure.
That's great. I'm glad somebody's doing it. So at ACT back in Louisville, right, I did a little lunch discussion on my current passion, which is something I mentioned earlier in passing, which is academic myths that we have absorbed and taken on into our own psyches, and that they become the background now, and we don't even know they're there, helping us make decisions that we might not want to be making if we were to question any of these things we've been sold, I guess I would say. So so I had a little discussion about what are some of these academic myths that may or may not still serve you, and you can be like, oh, I still believe that and I'm fine with it, or maybe I need to question this, and then what might be an alternate way to think about it. And then I also provided people with resources about that particular myth if they wanted to look into it more. So what I've now done is created a slide deck on my website that has, every slide is myth, fact. I mean, the fact is really a reframe, right? Myth, fact, and resources. So I will just give maybe a couple of them. I should have pulled it up. So one might...
Well, actually, what we can do, and I'm sure I can find the link, but we can include it in the show notes when we release this
perfect.
episode.
That's perfect. But I do want to give one. I'll do one on teaching. So
sure.
One would be, if I were to redesign my course and maybe reduce the grading burden on me, that makes me a bad professor and a bad teacher and says I don't care about students. So the idea that if I, get more efficient in my grading time, then I'm not giving students what they need, right? Questioning that assumption that there may be ways that you can make your grading time more efficient and the students are still getting what they need, but you're taking out the things that don't have an add-on for that learning value, right? And so sort of releasing ourselves from constant sort of judgment and being trapped in critiques of ourselves that might not actually be accurate in the assumptions we're making about those things, right? And then what I have on the slide deck, which would be great if you could link it, is the resources will be like podcast episodes where I've talked about it, or essays where I've talked about it, or another person's resource that's really cool that can help people sort of think through those things. So I think that's going to be something I'm going to be working on the next few years. I'm pretty passionate about it. I think we're kind of walking through, the more stressed out we are, the less we're able to stop and think about these things. And I think the stress has gone up so much, it's unbearable. And the only way we're going to get any handle on the stress, because the stress is coming from systems changes, right? And pressures that are not under our immediate control. But if we continue to believe some of these myths, I think it's going to make the stress higher. So I'm trying to help people be less stressed out.
Yeah, I think probably all of us are guilty of, it's the end of the semester. I've got to prep for January for the start of a new semester. And if I'm teaching the same classes, I'm just going to keep teaching the same way because like you just said, I don't have time to think about, do I really need to assign all those assignments? I've talked to people who do this kind of spot grading where they'll say, okay, 20 students are handing in something. I'm going to grade 3 of them. You don't know which ones. It's going to be random. And over the course of the semester, everyone will be graded the same amount.
Precisely.
A faculty member doesn't have to read every single word that a student submits.
Oh, preach. I mean, really, we really need to think about this more. It isn't always true that more is more.
Right. That more is better. Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Kim, I know we're bumping up on time here. This is like one of the fastest hours has ever gone by for me. And so thank you so much for making the time. Thanks for sharing your passions. And I hardly think we got to talk about all the things. So I hope you'll come back again.
I would love to, and maybe we can figure out a way for you to come visit mine. But I do hope the people listening to this made it through the end because, maybe our like roller coaster might have been a little too bumpy for people, but hopefully there was something there.
There's a lot there for sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invite, Eric. I appreciate it. And thank you all for doing this podcast. I think it's pretty cool.
Thank you.
Psych Sessions can do what it does because of listeners like you. We want to thank you for your support over the years in our mission to get more free professional development to all teachers of psychology around the world. If you want to support us further by making a tax-deductible donation, please head to psychsessions.org/donations. Thanks for listening.